All right, let's talk about one of the most brutal, merciless, and utterly terrifying Xenos species in Warhammer 40k, the Rak'gol. These creatures aren't just another band of raiders lurking in the void. They are a nightmare given form, a race of monstrous, cybernetically enhanced killers driven by an unrelenting hunger for destruction. Unlike the orcs, who revel in war, or the Drukhari, who seek pleasure in suffering, the Rock-Gol exist solely to annihilate. There's no diplomacy, no complex society, no overarching ideology, just unfiltered savage brutality. But what makes them truly terrifying is not just their mindless slaughter. It's the unknown. Nobody knows where they came from, what their ultimate goal is, or even if they have one. They appear from the darkness of space, butcher entire colonies with horrifying efficiency, and vanish just as quickly. The Imperium barely understands them, and even the Chaos Gods seem to keep their distance. That last part? That's what really makes them disturbing. Chaos corrupts, consumes, and twists everything it touches, yet Rak'gol seem to resist its grasp. How is that possible? And more importantly, what does that mean? If even the ruinous powers hesitate to claim them, then what are the Rak'gol really? To understand just how terrifying they are, we need to go back to where it all started, because the first time the Imperium encountered the Rak'gol, it was nothing short of a massacre. All right, let's dive into the first recorded encounter between the Imperium and the Rak'gol, an event that can only be described as an unmitigated bloodbath. No negotiations, no cryptic messages, no warnings, just pure, unrelenting slaughter. The Rak'gol first made their presence known in the Coronis Expanse, a region on the fringes of Imperial space, where rogue traders and explorers venture into the unknown, chasing profit, power, and sometimes death. It's the kind of place where mysteries fester, where the Imperium's grip is weak, and where all manner of horrors lurk beyond the reach of the Astronomicon. But even in a place like that, no one was prepared for the sheer nightmare that was about to unfold. The first major recorded attack happened when a rogue trader vessel stumbled upon an unknown Xenos fleet. Now, rogue traders are no strangers to Xenos encounters. These are people who deal with the bizarre on a regular basis, trading with Eldar corsairs, bribing top merchants, or even making backroom deals with things far worse. But the Rock-Gol weren't here to talk, and they sure as hell weren't interested in diplomacy. What happened next was brutal. The Rock-Gol's ships, crude-looking and seemingly cobbled together, surged forward with an almost suicidal aggression. Their weaponry, though appearing primitive at first glance, tore through void shields like they were paper. It wasn't just firepower, it was the way they fought. They didn't engage in strategic maneuvers or prolonged battles. They overwhelmed, they boarded, and they slaughtered. When they made contact, it wasn't a battle. It was a feeding frenzy. Survivors, if you can call them that, described the Rock-Gol warriors as monstrous, multi-limbed beasts covered in crude cybernetics, screeching in some guttural, incomprehensible language. They didn't just kill, they ripped people apart with their bare hands. And it wasn't random chaos, it was purposeful. They targeted leadership first, taking down commanders and officers in moments, spreading panic through the ranks. It was as if they had an instinctive understanding of how to dismantle an enemy force from within. The Imperium didn't even know what to make of them at first. Were they some lost abhuman strain, a corrupted offshoot of some forgotten civilization, or something even worse? And then came the truly disturbing part. Their attacks weren't just about destruction. They were searching for something. Many reports mention how Rock-Gol raiders seemed obsessed with tearing apart human technology, scavenging specific pieces before vanishing back into the void. They weren't just looting like orcs, they were after something in particular. Some theorists believe they were looking for ancient Xenos artifacts, possibly even remnants of Necron or Yuvath technology. Others think it's something far darker, something tied to the warp itself. Because here's the thing, while Chaos warbands and cultists have tried to study or even capture Rock-Gol for their own purposes, it's never ended well. Chaos thrives on corruption and manipulation, but the Rock-Gol seem resistant. Worse than that, they react with an almost primal hatred towards anything warp-touched. There are even records of Rock-Gol tearing apart Chaos Space Marines with the kind of unrelenting rage you'd expect from someone who had a deeply personal vendetta against the ruinous powers. And that raises a terrifying question. Are they running from something? Do they know something about the warp that even the Imperium doesn't? The more we learn about the Rock-Gol, the less sense they make. They shouldn't be this organized, this methodical. They shouldn't have such a strong aversion to chaos. And yet they do. The Imperium, of course, did what it always does when faced with an unknown alien threat. It tried to wipe them out. But the Rock-Gol weren't some mindless horde that could be crushed with superior firepower. Every time the Imperium mounted a counterattack, the Rock-Gol adapted, shifting their strategies, learning their enemies' weaknesses. It wasn't just war. It was an escalating cycle of violence, one that continues to this day. And the worst part? We still don't know where they come from. No homeworld has ever been found. No clear hierarchy has ever been established. They exist in the void, appearing out of nowhere and vanishing just as fast. Some believe they come from the farthest edges of the galaxy, beyond even the reach of the Astronomicon. Others whisper that they might be something even worse, something ancient, something that predates even the oldest records of the Imperium. But one thing is certain. Wherever the Rock-Gol go, death follows. And whatever they are searching for, we can only pray they never find it. If there's one thing that truly sets the Rock-Gol apart from the rest of the galaxy's horrors, it's their sheer unrelenting savagery. But it's not just about their mindset. It's something deeper, something written into their very biology. The Rock-Gol aren't just violent by choice. They are built for it. Every inch of their grotesque cybernetic riddled bodies screams one thing: destruction. Standing larger than even an Astartes, a single Rock-Gol warrior is a nightmarish mix of muscle, jagged bone, and crude augmetics. Their bodies are covered in thick, pale, chitin-like flesh, giving them a grotesque, almost insectoid appearance. Multiple arms, clawed and powerful, extend from their torsos, allowing them to wield an absurd number of weapons at once. Imagine fighting something that doesn't just have two hands. It has four, sometimes more, all armed with savage melee weapons or crude but deadly firearms. It's the kind of creature that doesn't just kill. It dismembers, rips, and tears with terrifying efficiency. And the most disturbing part, their augmetics. Unlike the sleek cybernetics of the Adeptus Mechanicus, or even the brutal but functional enhancements of the Iron Warriors, Rock-Gol augmetics are crude, jagged, and often look as if they were bolted onto living flesh without any care for pain or compatibility. In fact, some theories suggest that pain is a core part of their existence, that suffering fuels them in some way, pushing them into even greater frenzies of violence. If that's true, then every single Rock-Gol is a walking nightmare, constantly teetering on the edge of uncontrollable bloodlust. But despite this, they are not mindless. Far from it. Their society, if you can even call it that, is built around a rigid, brutal hierarchy where only the strongest survive. Leadership among the Rock-Gol isn't based on wisdom, strategy, or even experience. It's based on raw, unfiltered power. If you want to lead, you take what you want by force. And if someone stronger decides they want your position, you better be ready to fight for your life, because there is no diplomacy, no negotiations, only blood. At the top of this savage hierarchy are the Broodmasters. If a regular Rock-Gol is a walking horror, then a Broodmaster is something far worse. Larger, stronger, and often even more heavily augmented, these creatures rule through sheer dominance, killing any who dare challenge them. Their very presence drives lesser Rock-Gol into frenzies, pushing them into even more brutal acts of carnage. Some have theorized that there's some kind of psychic or pheromonal control at play, but nobody knows for sure. What is clear, however, is that when a Broodmaster enters the battlefield, things go from bad to catastrophic. Beneath them are the Marauder Packs, vicious war bands of Rock-Gol warriors who act as the backbone of their raids. These creatures live for battle, each one a relentless killer with little regard for anything beyond the next slaughter. If there is any kind of coordination between them, it is purely instinctual, like a pack of predatory beasts working together out of necessity rather than any real strategy. And then there are the tech gnarl. This is where things get weird. Among the Rock-Gol, some individuals seem to have an unnatural affinity for technology, not in the way that the Mechanicus worships the machine god, but in a far more disturbing way. These tech gnarl don't build or innovate. They scavenge, tear apart, and repurpose technology in ways that defy logic. They create cybernetic monstrosities, grafting weapons and augments onto themselves and others with no apparent concern for compatibility or function. Yet somehow, it works. Their ships, their weapons, their armor, it all seems barely held together, but in combat, it proves terrifyingly effective. And here's the part that really unsettles a lot of people. What if the tech gnarl aren't just making these augmentations randomly? What if they're following some kind of hidden directive? Some fans have speculated that the Rock-Gol might not be as primitive as they seem. What if their crude, nightmarish technology is actually based on something far older? Something they don't even fully understand themselves? The way they scavenge specific pieces of ancient tech, their strange, almost ritualistic use of cybernetics, it all points to something more than just random barbarism. And then there's the biggest question of all. Where do they come from? No homeworld has ever been identified. No Rak'gol civilization has ever been found. They seem to exist purely as raiders, appearing from the void in their ramshackle ships before vanishing into the darkness once more. But a species this aggressive, this destructive, doesn't just emerge from nowhere. Something made them. Something shaped them into what they are today. And if we ever find out what that something is, we might regret it. If you ever get a chance to see Rock-Gol technology up close, though, let's be real, if you do, you're probably already dead, you'd be forgiven for thinking it's little more than crude scrap cobbled together by mindless brutes. And at first glance, that's exactly what it looks like. Their weapons are jagged, their ships are hulking nightmares of rusted metal and mismatched components, and their cybernetic enhancements look like they were slapped on without a second thought. But here's the thing. None of that stops their tech from working. In fact, it works terrifyingly well. Rock-Gol weapons aren't elegant. They're not designed for precision or tactical versatility. They exist for one reason, to kill as brutally and efficiently as possible. Their most infamous ranged weapon, the X-Rad blaster, is a perfect example. It's a horrifying energy-based weapon that bathes its target in searing radiation, melting flesh and boiling organs almost instantly. And just in case that wasn't enough, it leaves behind lingering radioactive burns, ensuring that even if a victim somehow survives, they'll likely die in agony soon after. There's no finesse here, just raw, unchecked lethality. Then there are their melee weapons, and this is where things get really disturbing. Rock-Gol prefer close combat, and their weapons reflect that. Massive, jagged cleavers, brutal saw-edged swords, and electrified mauls, all designed to rip, tear, and pulverize anything in their path. Many of these weapons are fused directly into their bodies, cybernetically linked to their nervous systems to allow for almost instinctive attacks. This means a Rock-Gol doesn't just swing a weapon. It reacts on a level that most humanoid warriors can't even comprehend. And then there are their ships. If you thought their weapons were unsettling, their voidcraft are even worse. At first glance, a Rock-Gol vessel looks like a drifting wreck, hulking, asymmetrical, and barely held together. But that appearance is deceptive. Because once battle begins, these things move with terrifying speed, charging headlong into combat with reckless abandon. They don't engage in elegant void maneuvers or calculated long-range engagements. They rush forward, hammering enemy ships with savage firepower before ramming them outright. And this is where their true horror reveals itself. The Rock-Gol love boarding actions. They don't just destroy ships. They want to get inside, to rip apart the crew with their own claws, to tear through corridors in a frenzy of blood and screams. Their ships are built around this philosophy. Massive airlocks, crude but brutally effective breaching torpedoes, and entire sections of their hulls that can be explosively detached to launch swarms of warriors into enemy vessels. Once they're inside, it's over. No mercy, no surrender, just slaughter. Then there's the real mystery. Their cybernetics. If there's one thing that truly sets the Rock-Gol apart, it's their insane use of augmentation. They don't just modify their bodies, they practically rebuild themselves. A normal Rock-Gol warrior is terrifying enough, but the ones who have undergone extreme cybernetic modification are something else entirely. Limbs replaced with massive blades, spines reinforced with metal plating, entire neural systems rewired to remove pain or fear responses. And the process? It's brutal. They don't have skilled tech priests ensuring smooth integration. These modifications are crude, often bolted onto living flesh without any form of anesthesia or medical precision. The fact that they not only survive but thrive with these augmentations is nothing short of horrifying. But here's where it gets really strange. Rock-Gol technology should be unreliable. The way they graft on augments, the way their ships look like they should fall apart at any moment, it shouldn't work. And yet, it does. Which raises an even bigger question. Where are they getting this knowledge? Some believe they might have scavenged their technology from an older, forgotten Xenos race, something that came before them. Others think there's something darker at play, that maybe, just maybe, the Rock-Gol aren't the true architects of their own weapons and ships, that they might be following some kind of blueprint left behind by something much older. And then there's the biggest concern of all. Rock-Gol have been spotted raiding ancient Xenos ruins, seemingly searching for specific artifacts. They don't just grab whatever they can find. They target certain relics, certain pieces of technology. If they were just mindless marauders, that wouldn't make sense. But they're not. They know what they're looking for. The scariest possibility. What if the Rock-Gol are evolving? What if they're not just scavenging, but actually improving? Their technology may look crude now, but what happens if they start refining it? What happens if they figure out how to weaponize whatever it is they're searching for? Because let's be honest, if the Rock-Gol ever develop truly advanced technology, the galaxy is in serious trouble. If you're trying to understand the Rock-Gol, the first thing you need to accept is that their entire existence is built on one thing: violence. Not war, not conquest, not even survival in the traditional sense. Pure, unfiltered, unrelenting bloodshed. There's no diplomacy, no ideology, no larger vision for the galaxy. They don't fight for power, wealth, or even territory. They fight because it is what they are. This isn't like the orcs who revel in battle as a form of sport, or the Drukhari who inflict suffering for pleasure. The Rak'gol don't seem to take joy in what they do. Their violence isn't entertainment. It's ritualistic. It's structured. It's something woven into the very fabric of their being, like a sacred duty they must carry out, even if no one else understands why. If you watch how they fight, it becomes obvious. Their attacks aren't reckless, even if they seem that way at first. They don't just kill randomly. There's a method to their madness, an instinctive understanding of how to inflict the most destruction possible in the shortest amount of time. They target leadership first, cutting the head off their enemies before tearing through the rest. They don't leave survivors unless they want something from them, whether it's information, raw materials, or something far worse. And the strangest part, they don't even seem to care about their own casualties. They throw themselves into combat without hesitation, willing to die in droves if it means overwhelming their enemies. It's not bravery. It's not desperation. It's something else. Some believe the Rock-Gol see violence as a kind of sacred act, that their society is structured around constant bloodshed as a form of worship. But worship of what? There are no records of Rock-Gol religion, no signs of them praying to gods or building temples, yet their actions suggest a kind of faith in destruction itself. One of the most unsettling theories floating around is that the Rock-Gol are enacting some kind of ancient directive, something passed down so long ago that they might not even remember why. Maybe they were created for war. Maybe they were designed as weapons by something far older and far worse, and they've been carrying out their purpose ever since, long after their original creators vanished. And if that's true, it raises a terrifying question. What happens when they're done? If there's a goal, an end game to their slaughter, what does that look like? Do they even know? Or are they just killing because it's all they've ever known? Another theory suggests that the Rock-Gol are trapped in a cycle they can't escape. Their society is based entirely on brutality, with leadership determined through strength alone. There's no room for scholars, no space for diplomacy. The moment a Rock-Gol tries to break the cycle, to question their way of life, they're likely torn apart by their own kind. It's an existence that perpetuates itself endlessly, violence for the sake of violence, survival through endless slaughter. And then there's their relationship with chaos, or rather, their complete and utter rejection of it. Unlike most Xenos races, the Rock-Gol don't just resist chaos, they actively despise it. There are records of them going out of their way to destroy chaos warbands, annihilating them with the same unrelenting fury they bring to everything else. That kind of hatred isn't normal. It suggests history. It suggests something personal. What if the Rock-Gol were once something else? Something that chaos tried to corrupt, but failed? What if their entire culture of violence is a result of that, a way to purge weakness and prevent themselves from ever falling under the ruinous powers? Maybe their society is so brutal because they believe that anything less would make them vulnerable. Maybe, in their own twisted way, they see their constant bloodshed as a form of protection, because the moment they stop, the moment they grow soft, something far worse will claim them. The Imperium will likely never understand the Rock-Gol. No one will. They are an anomaly, a force of chaos that isn't tied to the warp, a storm of destruction that doesn't seek power or dominion. They simply are. And maybe that's the scariest part of all, because you can reason with ambition. You can predict greed, but you can't bargain with something that only exists to kill. If there's one thing that truly sets the Rock-Gol apart from every other savage, war-hungry race in the galaxy, it's their relationship with the warp, or rather, their complete and utter rejection of it. In a universe where chaos corrupts everything it touches, where even the strongest warriors and the most advanced civilizations eventually fall to its temptations, the Rock-Gol stand out as something entirely different. They don't just resist chaos, they despise it. And that makes them something terrifying. The first thing to understand is that the Rock-Gol don't use psychic powers. Not in any capacity. No warp-wielding sorcerers, no demonic pacts, no attempts to harness the immaterium for their own gain. That alone is rare, but it gets even weirder. Whenever the Rock-Gol encounter chaos warp technology, artifacts, or even beings, their reaction isn't curiosity. It's rage. They destroy it without hesitation. Not just chaos-worshipping humans, but actual chaos space marines, cultists, and even demons themselves. There are recorded instances of Rock-Gol warbands launching brutal attacks on chaos warfleets, ignoring more obvious targets just to wipe out chaos-corrupted enemies with extreme prejudice. That kind of hatred isn't random, it's personal. But the real question is, why? Every other race in the galaxy has some connection to the warp, whether they want it or not. Even the Necrons, who hate the warp more than anything, still have to acknowledge its influence. But the Rock-Gol? They don't just reject it. It's almost like they're immune to it. And that is not normal. There are a few theories about this, and none of them are comforting. The first, and most obvious, is that the Rock-Gol evolved in some environment that made them naturally resistant to chaos. Maybe their homeworld, or whatever horrifying hellscape they crawled out of, was so saturated with warp energy that only those who could resist it survived. Maybe their genetic makeup makes them incompatible with the kind of corruption that turns humans and Xenos alike into gibbering, chaos-fueled monsters. If that's the case, then the Rock-Gol might be some kind of evolutionary anomaly, being so biologically resistant to chaos that they instinctively react to it as a threat rather than a temptation. But then, there's the darker theory. What if the Rock-Gol weren't always this way? What if they were something else entirely, something that Chaos tried to claim but failed? Some have speculated that the Rock-Gol were once a psychically active species, maybe even warp worshippers themselves until something happened. Something that burned out their connection to the immaterium and turned them into the monstrosities they are today. Think about it. Chaos has a habit of twisting and warping those who serve it. But what happens if something fights back? What if, long ago, the Rock-Gol were exposed to something so catastrophic, so overwhelmingly destructive, that it severed their link to the warp entirely? Maybe they saw what chaos truly is, what it does to those who fall into its grasp, and decided that the only way to survive was to purge every last trace of it from their existence. There's even speculation that this might be connected to their obsession with ancient technology. The Rock-Gol seem to hunt for specific relics, scavenging ruins and tearing through Xenos vaults for artifacts that no one else understands. What if they're searching for something that can help them finish what they started? What if they're looking for a way to erase chaos completely? Of course, that's assuming they even think that far ahead. There's also the possibility that their hatred of chaos is less about knowledge and more about raw instinct. Maybe whatever was done to them, whether it was self-inflicted or forced upon them, left them in a state of perpetual rage. Maybe they don't even know why they kill chaos worshippers and destroy warp-tainted relics. They just do, like animals following an instinct that's been burned into their very existence. And if that's true, then we're looking at something terrifying, because it means the Rock-Gol don't need a reason. They don't need a plan. They simply destroy. They tear down anything and everything that reeks of the warp, not because they choose to, but because they can't do anything else. But the biggest question remains. If chaos fears them, if even the dark gods hesitate to touch them, then what does that say about the Rock-Gol? Because chaos is not afraid of many things. It has devoured empires, turned champions into demigods, and twisted the very fabric of reality to its will. And yet, for some reason, the Rock-Gol remain outside its grasp. And in a universe where the warp is an unstoppable force, where even the most righteous eventually fall, the fact that something exists beyond its reach, that might be the most terrifying thing of all. Trying to understand the motives of the Rock-Gol is like trying to make sense of a storm. It doesn't care, it doesn't think, it just destroys. At least, that's what the Imperium wants to believe. The official stance on the Rock-Gol is that they are nothing more than mindless beasts, a force of nature that sweeps through space, leaving only corpses and ruin in their wake. But what if that's not the whole truth? What if there's something more lurking beneath the surface of their endless slaughter? On the surface, the Rock-Gol seem like little more than barbaric marauders. They appear suddenly, attack with overwhelming violence, and vanish before anyone can truly understand what just happened. They don't claim territory, they don't build cities, and they don't negotiate. It's easy to assume that they're just another savage Xenos race, driven purely by bloodlust. But the more you look at their actions, the more it starts to feel deliberate. For one, their raids aren't random. Sure, they might seem chaotic, but there's a pattern, one that suggests they're looking for something. They don't just hit planets or ships at random. They specifically target places with old Xenos ruins, lost human technology, or anything that might hold some kind of hidden knowledge. It's like they're hunting for something ancient, something buried in the past. And then there's their behavior in battle. They don't just kill for the sake of it. There's a method to their madness. They prioritize leaders, cutting down command structures before moving on to the rest. They don't waste time capturing territory, and they rarely bother with holding ground. Once they've taken what they want, they leave, disappearing back into the void as quickly as they came. That's not the behavior of mindless killers. That's the behavior of something with a goal. But what could that goal be? One theory is that they're searching for lost technology, maybe even something that ties into their deep hatred for chaos. We know they despise the warp, going out of their way to destroy anything even remotely tainted by it. What if they're looking for something that can wipe chaos out completely? What if their entire existence is based on finding a way to undo whatever it was that first exposed them to the horrors of the warp? Another theory is that they're not acting alone. What if the Rock-Gol serve something? Something older, something hidden, something we haven't even begun to understand. There are reports, unconfirmed of course, of Rock-Gol raids that seem to be focused on uncovering strange artifacts, relics from civilizations that predate even the Eldar. If they're working towards something, it's possible they don't even understand it themselves. Or maybe they're not searching for something. Maybe they're running from something. The way they move, the way they strike hard and disappear. What if they're not just raiders, but refugees of some kind? What if there's something out there, something even worse than the Rock-Gol, that's driving them deeper into Imperial space? And then there's the truly unsettling possibility that the Rock-Gol don't need a reason, that their slaughter isn't about some grand plan or hidden directive, that they are, at their core, exactly what they appear to be, a force of destruction so pure, so primal, that it doesn't require an explanation. Some fans believe that the Rock-Gol might not even think about the future. They might not have an ultimate goal beyond the next battle, the next kill, but that, in itself, is a kind of goal, isn't it? In a galaxy where everyone is playing some long, convoluted game, whether it's the Imperium desperately clinging to its existence, the Eldar trying to avoid their inevitable doom, or the Necrons slowly waking from their slumber, the Rock-Gol stand apart. They don't care about fate. They don't care about the politics of the galaxy. They don't build empires or forge alliances. They simply destroy. And in a way, that might be the most terrifying motive of all. Because you can bargain with ambition. You can understand greed. But how do you fight something that wants nothing except to see everything burn? If you want to understand just how dangerous the Rock-Gol are, you have to look at how they interact with the rest of the galaxy. The Imperium, the Eldar, the Tau, even the Orcs. Every major faction in Warhammer 40k has encountered them in some capacity, and every single time, the result has been the same. Chaos, destruction, slaughter. Unlike most Xenos species, the Rock-Gol don't have allies, trade partners, or even rivals in the traditional sense. They are a threat to everyone, and they do not discriminate when it comes to choosing their victims. For the Imperium, the Rock-Gol are one of those Xenos threats that nobody really understands, but everyone dreads. Unlike the Tyranids, who have an obvious goal, to consume all biomass, the Rock-Gol seem to strike for reasons that make no sense. They don't conquer worlds, they don't establish footholds, and they don't try to expand their influence. They just hit hard, cause as much damage as possible, and vanish into the void. That alone makes them a nightmare for Imperial commanders. There's no predicting them, no way to anticipate their next move. A Rock-Gol fleet could emerge from the warp at any moment, tear through an entire sector, and then disappear, leaving nothing but wreckage in their wake. But what makes them even more terrifying is how they fight. The Imperium has faced countless threats, Orc warbands, Tyranid high fleets, Necron legions. But there's something uniquely horrifying about the Rock-Gol. They don't just kill. They revel in brutality on a level that even the most hardened Adeptus Astartes find disturbing. Their boarding actions are legendary, not just because they're effective, but because they turn ships into slaughterhouses. There are reports of entire voidcraft being reduced to nothing but shredded metal and gore, of survivors found weeks later, barely clinging to life, whispering about the horrors they witnessed. And it's not just humans they target. The Eldar, both Craft World and Dark Eldar, have had their own encounters with the Rak'gol, and the results have been just as brutal. The Eldar, being as old and knowledgeable as they are, usually have some kind of record on every major Xenos race. But the Rock-Gol? There's almost nothing. That alone is unsettling. If the Eldar don't have a historical record of something, it either means that thing is too insignificant to bother with, or it's something so terrifying that even they don't want to acknowledge it. And here's where it gets even weirder. The Drukhari, the undisputed masters of pain and suffering, actually seem to hate dealing with the Rock-Gol. You'd think that a race as sadistic as the Dark Eldar would find some kind of twisted joy in fighting them. But no, they avoid them when they can. Why? Because the Rock-Gol don't play by the same rules. The Drukhari like to toy with their victims, stretching out their suffering for as long as possible. The Rock-Gol, on the other hand, don't waste time. They don't capture slaves, they don't leave survivors, and they don't negotiate. They just kill. And for a race that thrives on control and manipulation, the sheer mindless brutality of the Rock-Gol is something they simply don't know how to deal with. Then there's the Tau, the poor, naive Tau. Unlike the Imperium or the Eldar, the Tau actually tried to communicate with the Rock-Gol once. It didn't go well. The Tau believe in diplomacy, in finding peaceful solutions whenever possible. But the Rock-Gol? They don't talk. They don't negotiate. They don't even acknowledge the possibility of communication. They simply attacked, overwhelming the Tau fleet before the diplomats even had time to realize what was happening. It was a massacre. Since then, the Tau have learned their lesson. When you see the Rak'gol, you either run or you fight. There is no third option. Even the orcs, who will fight anything and everything, don't seem to enjoy going up against the Rock-Gol. You'd think that orcs, being orcs, would see them as the perfect opponents, mindless, ultra-violent monsters who only care about destruction. And sure, there have been clashes between orc warbands and Rock-Gol raiding parties. But here's the thing, orcs like a good scrap. They enjoy battle. The Rock-Gol, on the other hand, don't fight for fun. They fight to exterminate, and that makes them unsettling, even for orcs. Because what fun is a fight if your opponent doesn't care whether they live or die, as long as they get to tear you apart in the process? But perhaps the most interesting conflict involving the Rock-Gol is their relationship with chaos. Normally, when a new Xenos race emerges, chaos will try to corrupt it, twist it, bring it under its influence. But the Rock-Gol? Chaos doesn't seem to want anything to do with them. If anything, it's the opposite. The Rock-Gol go out of their way to destroy anything warp-tainted. There have been multiple reports of Rock-Gol fleets actively hunting down Chaos warbands, wiping them out with even more aggression than they show toward the Imperium. That's not normal, and it raises an important question. Why? Why do the Rock-Gol hate Chaos so much? Why do they avoid any kind of warp-based influence? It's not just that they're resistant to it. It's something deeper, something that suggests history. Maybe, long ago, the Rock-Gol were exposed to chaos in a way that left scars too deep to heal. Maybe they were once a psychically active race, only to be burned so badly by the warp that they purged themselves of any connection to it. Or maybe they know something the rest of us don't. Whatever the truth is, one thing is clear. No one is safe from the Rock-Gol. They don't discriminate. They don't form alliances. They don't make deals. Every faction in the galaxy, from the Imperium to the Eldar to the Tau, has tried to make sense of them, to fit them into some kind of understandable category. But the Rock-Gol don't fit. They're not conquerors. They're not scavengers. They're not ideologues or fanatics. They are something else entirely. And that, more than anything, is what makes them so terrifying. One of the strangest things about the Rock-Gol, aside from their sheer brutality and their hatred of chaos, is their obsession with ancient artifacts. This isn't just random scavenging or mindless looting. They aren't like orcs who pick up whatever shiny bit of tech they can find just to bash things with it. The Rock-Gol are looking for something specific, something old, something important, and that's what makes them so unsettling. Most of their raids don't just target populated Imperial worlds. They strike deep space research stations, lost Xenos ruins, and ancient archaeotech vaults. They hit places that contain knowledge, relics of long-dead civilizations, things that even the Mechanicus barely understands. And the way they attack these places isn't the same as their usual mindless slaughter. There's an efficiency to it, a purpose. They don't just kill. They take. The question is, what are they after? The most common theory is that they're hunting for remnants of the Yuvath. Now, if you don't know who the Yuvath were, you're not alone. The Imperium did everything it could to wipe out any trace of them. They were a Xenos race that built an empire on dark technology and warp sorcery, fusing the two into something even the most radical members of the Mechanicus found horrifying. The Yuvath didn't just use chaos. They engineered it, creating living weapons and nightmarish machines that could warp reality itself. When the Imperium finally crushed them, it wasn't just a military victory. It was an extermination. Every trace of their civilization was purged, or at least that was the plan. The problem with ancient horrors is that they never really go away. Even now, Yuvath artifacts still surface from time to time, dark, twisted constructs that no sane person should ever touch. And the Rock-Gol, they seem obsessed with them. There are reports of Rock-Gol warbands descending on Yuvath ruins, tearing through anything in their way, and then leaving with specific artifacts, often ignoring everything else in the process. That doesn't sound like a race of mindless barbarians. That sounds like something with a mission. But here's where it gets weird. The Rock-Gol themselves don't seem to use Yuvath technology in any obvious way. They don't wield warp-based weapons, they don't summon demons, and they don't seem to embrace the corrupting influence of these relics. So why are they taking them? One possibility is that they're trying to destroy them. If the Rak'gol really do have some deep-seated hatred of chaos, then it makes sense that they would want to track down and eliminate anything tied to the Yuvath. Maybe they see it as a threat, something that must be purged from existence. But if that's the case, why aren't they just destroying these relics on the spot? Why are they taking them, storing them, hoarding them? Another, far more disturbing theory is that the Rak'gol aren't just hoarding these artifacts, they're using them. Not in the way the Yuvath did, but in their own strange, brutal fashion. Rock-Gol technology is already an enigma. It shouldn't work as well as it does. Their cybernetics, their ship systems, their weapons, everything about their technology looks like it should be barely functioning scrap. But in reality, it's devastatingly effective. What if their tech is more than just crude engineering? What if it's based on something ancient, something they barely understand? Maybe the Rock-Gol aren't just scavenging these artifacts. Maybe they're integrating them. Some of their higher-ranking warlords, the Broodmasters and Tech Gnarl, have been spotted using strange, seemingly advanced devices that don't match the usual crude brutality of Rock-Gol tech. There are even reports, though unconfirmed, of Rock-Gol wielding weapons that pulse with an unnatural glow, weapons that seem far too refined for their usual savage aesthetic. Could these be remnants of Yuvath technology? Are the Rock-Gol taking the dark relics of an extinct race and adapting them to their own monstrous needs? And if that's true, what does that mean for the galaxy? The Yuvath were wiped out because their technology was too dangerous to exist. If the Rock-Gol have found a way to harness it, or worse, improve it, then the Imperium might be facing something far worse than just another Xenos raiding species. They might be facing the resurgence of an ancient horror, one that doesn't just want to kill, but to consume. The worst part? No one knows what the Rock-Gol are really trying to do with these relics. They don't explain themselves. They don't communicate. They don't reveal their plans. They just take, and whatever they're looking for, whatever they're gathering, one day, they're going to find it. And when they do, we might all regret not stopping them sooner. If there's one thing that makes the Rock-Gol even more terrifying than their brutality, their obsession with ancient relics, or their hatred of chaos, it's the fact that no one knows where they came from. They don't have a homeworld, they don't have a recorded history, and they don't seem to follow the same evolutionary patterns as other Xenos species. They just appeared one day, spreading death and destruction wherever they went. It's as if they were never meant to be found, like something out of a nightmare that clawed its way into reality. And that's where the theories begin. The most obvious possibility is that the Rock-Gol are simply an undiscovered species that evolved on some nightmare world deep in the void, far beyond the reach of the Astronomicon. The galaxy is vast, and there are plenty of places where life could have developed without ever being noticed. Maybe they were always like this, brutal, violent, and utterly hostile. Maybe their planet was so unforgiving that only the most ruthless, cybernetically enhanced monsters could survive. If that's the case, then the Rak'gol are just a natural product of their environment. That's terrifying in its own right, because it means that out there, somewhere, is a world that forged creatures like this. A world so horrific that this level of violence isn't just an advantage, it's a necessity. But then there's the theory that they didn't just evolve, that they were made. Some believe the Rock-Gol are the result of an ancient experiment gone horribly wrong. Their heavy use of cybernetics, their obsession with scavenging and modifying technology, their complete disregard for their own suffering, it all feels too unnatural, too engineered. What if they were created as a weapon? A bioengineered shock force designed for war, built by some long-forgotten civilization that lost control of them? Maybe they were meant to be the ultimate warriors, augmented beyond reason, stripped of empathy, driven by a singular purpose: to kill. And if that's true, then the real question is, who made them? And what happened to them? There are even some who suggest that the Rock-Gol could have been created by the Yuvath. It sounds crazy at first, but think about it. The Yuvath were masters of warp-infused technology, twisting flesh and machine into something unnatural. What if the Rock-Gol were their greatest experiment? A species built for war, immune to the lure of chaos, designed to exterminate anything that stood in their creator's way. And then, when the Yuvath were destroyed, the Rock-Gol were left without purpose, doomed to wander the stars in an endless cycle of violence. If that's true, then the Rock-Gol aren't just scavengers looking for Yuvath relics. They're trying to reconnect with their past, to reclaim whatever dark purpose they were originally given. But if you really want to lose sleep at night, there's an even worse possibility. What if the Rock-Gol didn't come from this galaxy at all? The idea that they might have originated outside the known universe, or even beyond real space itself, is one of the more unsettling fan theories. Some point to their bizarre physiology, their seemingly instinctive hatred for chaos, and their erratic behavior as signs that they don't belong here. What if they came from somewhere else? Somewhere darker, somewhere worse? There's a particularly grim theory that suggests the Rock-Gol are running from something, that they aren't just mindless raiders, but refugees of a war that we can't even comprehend. Imagine a force so terrifying, so utterly destructive, that even the Rock-Gol, these monstrous, hyper-aggressive killers, are afraid of it. Maybe whatever created them, or whatever world they came from, was wiped out by something even worse. Maybe they've been fleeing ever since, carving a path of destruction not out of malice, but out of desperation. And if that's true, then we have an even bigger problem, because it means whatever they're running from is still out there. At the end of the day, no one really knows where the Rak'gol came from. No records, no ancient texts, no whispers in the archives of the Eldar or the Mechanicus. Just blood and ruin in their wake. Maybe that's the most terrifying thing about them. Every other horror in the galaxy, Tyranids, Necrons, Chaos, has an origin, a story, a reason for existing. But the Rock-Gol? They just appeared, and that means they could appear again. More of them, worse than before. Maybe they were never supposed to be found. Maybe we were never supposed to know they existed. But now we do. And whatever secret they're hiding, one day we're going to find out. And when that day comes, the galaxy may regret ever asking the question. The Rock-Gol are a nightmare given form. In a galaxy filled with horrors, the relentless hunger of the Tyranids, the ancient malevolence of the Necrons, the twisted cruelty of chaos, somehow they still manage to stand apart. Not because they're stronger, not because they're smarter, but because they don't fit. They don't follow the rules. Every major faction in Warhammer 40k has a goal, a reason for their existence. The Imperium fights for survival. The Eldar fight against their own extinction. The Orcs fight because they enjoy it. Even the Tyranids, as alien as they are, have a purpose. They consume to grow. But the Rock-Gol? No one knows what they want. They don't conquer. They don't negotiate. They don't even seem to fight for any clear strategic reason. They just kill. And that makes them unpredictable, which is far more terrifying than any great galaxy-spanning war machine. The Imperium has faced countless Xenos threats before, but there's something about the Rock-Gol that makes them uniquely disturbing. Their raids come without warning, and their brutality is unlike anything else. They don't just exterminate their enemies, they revel in it, dismantling their victims with a precision that seems more ritualistic than tactical. They don't fight for resources or power. They fight because it's what they are. But what's worse is that they are still a mystery. Their origins, their motivations, even their biology, none of it makes sense. They're covered in crude cybernetics, yet somehow their technology is brutally efficient. They despise chaos, yet they seem to be drawn to its ancient remnants. They exist in the void, yet no one knows where they truly come from. Every theory about them raises more questions than answers. Were they created as a weapon? Were they once something else, twisted by some unseen force? Are they running from something, or are they hunting for something even more terrifying than themselves? And the worst part? The Rock-Gol aren't an existential threat like the Necrons or the Tyranids. They aren't trying to consume or rule the galaxy. But in a way, that's what makes them even more dangerous. You can prepare for an invasion. You can fortify worlds, mobilize fleets, develop strategies. But how do you fight something that doesn't behave the way war is supposed to work? How do you prepare for an enemy that doesn't build empires, doesn't follow patterns, and doesn't leave anything behind? That's the true horror of the Rock-Gol, the unknown. They are a walking, howling enigma, tearing through the stars with no clear purpose and no apparent endgame. They are destruction incarnate, without ambition, without diplomacy, without reason. And that's why they are still one of the greatest unsolved mysteries in the Warhammer 40K universe. One day we may learn the truth about the Rock-Gol. We may discover what they are, where they come from, and what their true purpose is. But when that day comes, we may wish we had never asked. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the most savage and mysterious Xenos in Warhammer 40K, make sure to like the video, subscribe for more, and leave a comment with your own theories about the Rock-Gol. Could they be an ancient experiment gone wrong? A species running from something even worse? Or are they simply a force of destruction, with no greater meaning behind their endless slaughter? Let's discuss it in the comments below. Until next time, stay vigilant, because in the grim darkness of the far future, the Rock-Gol are still out there, and they are always watching.